All right, everyone, super excited to dive into this week's episode. A lot to cover. Tori Dunlap bringing it, not only sharing with us tips and strategies for negotiating your salary, but in the process, realizing her goal, her stated goal of $100,000 by the age of 25. Basically, the same day the episode went out, she announced, I did it, nailed it.
Yeah, that was so cool. Yeah, we got an email from Tori, and I saw her post in the FinCon community. So huge congrats to Tori. That's an amazing, amazing milestone by 25 years old.
There's this thing to be said for that. I mean, opportunity cost, time cost. If you can get that snowball, we always hear about the debt snowball, but if you can get, and I think JD Roth, to give him credit, I think he coined this, the wealth snowball. If you can get the wealth snowball working for you, and I mean, at any point in time, but in particular, at such a young age, $100,000 by 25, you're basically, to use another term, set for life. I mean, I've done the math on this in my own personal story, Brad, where I did 4 years of undergrad, 4 years of pharmacy school. I graduated with $168,000 of student loan debt. And, from there, I'm basically paying it off. And I'm doing this at the age of 28. So 28 years old, I'm negative 168K in student loan debt. If you were to flip that on its head and figure out how to save up $168,000 by the age of 28, so you just ruthlessly look at the earn more side and the spend less side. You figure out how to spend less on your education. You figure out how to earn more right out the gate, maybe through salary negotiation or picking a solid career. But either way, you have $168,000 by the age of 28. If you were to never save another dime, like you are paycheck to paycheck. Now this is very important. When I say paycheck to paycheck, I mean you spend everything you earn, but you don't go into debt. You're not drawing down on that 168K. That's working for you behind the scenes. At the age of 50, which is not a particularly long period of time, so 28 to 50, it's worth just a hair below $1 million based on average market returns over that period. It's like 960 some odd $1,000 if you were to make like an 8% return over that period of time. Like that's insane. It's you're basically assuming the same person that was able to save up that incredible amount of money and is now just drifting just because of those choices they made over that same period of time that I was going into debt, $168,000, is a millionaire.
Yeah, Jonathan, it is remarkable to see the power of compounding. That's really what we're talking about here. So if you're assuming an 8% return, then your money should double basically every 9 years. This is actually a really cool kind of just mental framework. So you figure if you're talking 170,000, let's just round it, right? So
I'm
at
going to get my calculator out and do
yeah.
this with you.
No, it's pretty cool, right? So, I mean, you have 170,000 at 28 years old. Then if we're assuming that 8% return, 9 years later at 37, it should be what, 340,000.
Yep.
And then 9 years later, so you're 46, it'll double to $680,000, right? This is with putting no additional money in. That's the remarkable part. This is just compounding. And then just for fun, one more time, at 55, this will be $1.36 million. And like you said, starting out with 168,000 of positive net worth, as opposed to when you were $168,000 in student loans. So yeah, I mean, clearly not everybody's going to get this right between 22 and 28, but the same concept works whether that's you're starting at 38 or 48. It's the magic of compounding. And I think that's really important. And it's just a kind of cool mental framework to assume that if you are getting that standard 8%, and obviously we know this ebbs and flows, right? There are some years where it goes up 20%. There are some years where the market goes down, right? I mean, very obviously, we know that. But if you're assuming over the long term that 8% annual compounded growth, it's going to double every 9 years. And that, again, is just a really cool framework just to look at your money and say, wow, my net worth is this today. 9 years from now, if I put nothing else in, it is going to be double.
So that principle, that rule that you just talked about has a name. It's called the rule of 72. And it's one of the most powerful, calculations that if you can internalize it, it can spill over into so many different calculations and kind of ROI based calculations that you actually apply yourself to. I know it's one that you within the last year or so finally were able to teach Anna.
Yeah, it was cool. We sat down with a Microsoft Excel sheet and just kind of went through what compounding is. And yeah, the rule of 72 basically says you take 72, and we'll actually use my example. So you divide by the interest rate or the expected annual return. So in this case, it's 8%, like we said. So you divide 72 by 8, and that equals 9. Okay. So that's the number of years that it takes to double your money. So in this case, 9. If you had, let's say, a 12% annual return, then you take 72 divided by that 12, and that's 6 years. So we know with the magic of compounding, if we wanted to run that exercise again, it's doubling every 6 years. So
His
that's
daughter
going
has
to
a goal of buying a national park.
be.
So she's like, I got time on my side. Rule of 72. I
Yeah.
got this.
She hasn't picked out the one yet, but it's coming. Don't worry.
They're all open. And so, I mean, as a parent, one of our favorite conversations is starting to think about what do these conversations look like with your kids? I think you've set up a financial structure for yourself that whether or not they know it or not, likely they have a landing pad behind them, right? But you don't really want them to know that to the point where they take it for granted. In your perfect scenario, they never need it, right? You are able to teach them the tools and the skills that they need in order to have this adventure on their own because it's fun to pursue it and to learn these things. And so at its core level, it starts with money talks and just being able to have these discussions up front so they're not having to learn it after things have gone horribly south. And so I love that this is one of the conversations that you've had, and I'm sure that it's one of many.
Yeah, agreed. We are constantly just kind of talking about money, but in the background, it's just part of life. We're normalizing it, which I think is what we're doing here with ChooseFI, right? I think it's what people find really refreshing about being able to talk about money, about financial independence, because so many of us in most of our real life, if you will, quote unquote, we don't talk about money. It's taboo. But here, you're normalizing something and then you feel free to ask questions. So my daughters are asking us questions all the time. And frankly, it's interesting to see their different personalities. So Molly, my little one, she's like the perfect example of she watches a commercial and she's like,
Ooh,
"Ooh, I
I
want
want
that." there,
that.
there was one, I kid you not, there was one that I forget what the company was. It's irrelevant, but they were selling used cars and you get like a 7-day money back guarantee. She's like, "Daddy, get rid of Golden Boy and we'll get a new car."
Does she call it Golden Boy?
She does. They do. It's so funny. And she's like, "We can return it if you don't like it."
You have 7
Like,
days.
yeah, it's amazing. How could it go wrong? So it's funny. I mean, they are totally different. Anna, on the other hand, is somebody who's just a natural saver. There's no question about it. But Molly, even though she has these proclivities to maybe spend a little more than Anna or Laura or myself, I still suspect very strongly because she's growing up in our house, she's going to be anchored to this 50% savings rate. Now, unlike maybe me, Laura, and Anna, who might have a 70, 80, 90% savings rate, Molly will probably have exactly a 50% savings rate.
Because that's what I have to do.
Right.
Will I do a penny more? No,
No
are you
way.
crazy?
No way. But it's hilarious. But how can you go wrong with a 50% savings rate? That's kind of the cool thing. So when you're anchored to that, and frankly, if she saves 30% or 34%, she's still doing great, right? So it's just interesting, A, to see your different kids' personalities and maybe have to tailor messages differently. And maybe this is a larger point for all of us about how do you reach people? You reach them where they are.
Mm.
And you have to understand where they're coming from, what their natural thoughts are, and maybe how to get through to them personally.
I have, gosh, so much there. By the way, we were talking offline just before we started about big words, great words. Well, we actually recorded a little bit of it. So if you're watching the YouTube channel at the end, we'll include it in the outtakes. But you just dropped proclivities there, like totally in flow state. I just wanted to give you a compliment on
Thank
that.
you.
It's strong, man. It's really strong. All right. I wanted to point out one other thing for our astute listeners here. That many of you heard us talk about compounding, and a few of you, a little bit legalistic, want to say, well, guys, I don't think that word means what you think it means. What you probably meant to say was total return. And you would be right. The principle and the way that it'll work for you are basically exactly the same. But compounding, like simple compounding, where you might see that in like a savings account or a CD or something like that, your money is worth more, that's reinvested, and now that's worth more. Whereas your investment vehicles, really, you're talking about some combination thereof. The actual stock that you own that's held inside of this fund is appreciating. It's worth more next year as the business grows. But then on top of that, it's probably spitting off some form of a dividend. And if that's being reinvested, the total of those together, the appreciation plus the dividend, is contributing towards a total return. So, just for you guys out there, just want to let you know, yes, you're right, total return. But the end is basically the same.
Right. And the math is the same.
And the math is the same, more importantly. Okay. Well, the other thing I wanted to say, reach them where they are. And actually, that's something that I think in the FI community, we need to be very cognizant of, because we have anchored ourselves very intentionally to this crazy goal, this 50% savings rate. And once you get your systems in place, that's doable. I mean, that can be doable. It's a big goal. It's an awesome goal, but it's doable. And it can also be simple. I know, Brad, that you commented that, the amount of time at this point that you spend on your finances, roughly 10 minutes a month. I spent a little bit more than that just trying to find my passwords for stuff. But to your point, I think it's reasonable, maybe some variant thereof. We got this email from someone that was listening to our podcast a while back talking about envelopes and had some constructive criticism for us. I thought maybe it would be relevant in the context of reach people where they are to read a portion of this email. We got this message from Bob, and he was saying he listened to us a couple weeks ago talking about Dave Ramsey and the envelope systems, and he wanted to stress he's actually taught the Financial Peace University class 5 times over the past 10 years, and personally, he's seen it transform families towards financial independence. Now, he was saying he appreciates the simplicity that, Brad, you were talking about, but many people that he's seen in these classes, they are not that sophisticated. And to the heart of reaching them where they are, this envelope system, like, it simplifies things down to something that you can hold, something that you can do, something that you can execute on. And so, his point and probably my point is, like, we've acknowledged this. Dave Ramsey is setting people up by helping them get out of debt and helping them get a simple system that they can get in place. He is setting them up for a wonderful path towards financial independence. But I think in the context of what we're saying, reaching people where we are, I think we probably did out of hand. And it was my experience. I'm a tech guy that was going out of my way to follow an envelope system. It didn't fit me like a glove. It didn't work really well for what I wanted, but you got to recognize that I'm not everybody. There are many people that the simplicity that's baked into this, when everything feels like it's chaos and it's out of control, being able to, for a period of time, tell your money exactly where to go. And when you feel like you have no discipline, to be able to say, all right, my money is in this envelope, and this envelope. For this period of time, it helps you get that control. And I think probably to my own detriment, I didn't acknowledge that, because I can see how that would be true for certain people. So I guess what I wanted to say with that is reach people where they are. And I think hopefully for everybody, I hope everyone graduates out of the envelope system. The envelope system is a defensive mechanism to bring control back into your life. And hopefully as you get this piece of the puzzle down, you're ready. You can't, not that you have to, but you can see how graduating out of that can simplify your life even further. If you're doing envelope systems, you are definitely spending more than 10 minutes a month on your finances.
Yeah, and I suspect most people do spend more than 10 minutes. So it's just because I have my system set up on
Are we
autopilot.
anchoring ourselves to 10 minutes, Brad?
Do not anchor that. I think it takes most people more than that. But I've set up systems that work for me. So for me, it's maybe doing something suboptimal, which is having more money in my checking account, because I don't want to stress about, oh, is that credit card bill coming out on this day? Do I have enough money? Do I have to transfer it? It's just something else to worry about. So obviously, I know that's a fortunate position that I'm in, that I have a couple extra $1,000 lying around and can keep that buffer. But to your point about defensive moves, right? It's similar, I guess, the envelope system in that regard. I agree with you that it probably would work for a short time until you can really lock this down and get some control. But it reminds me, in essence, of like with the defensive moves of people who freeze their credit cards or something, right? Like, it's hard to imagine someone who's down the path to financial independence and has everything locked down, has money in the bank, that they're freezing their credit cards, right? I suspect strongly there are some people, but it's probably not anywhere near a majority, right?
Are you talking about a technological solution to freeze your credit cards? Are you
No, I'm talking about
literally talking about putting your credit card inside a cube of ice and actually adding some lemon in there just for some fragrance?
Quite literally a block of ice. Okay. But you've heard of that, right? Like,
I might do it just for the show to have it as a prop. Yeah,
that would be great on YouTube. But right, clearly, once you have things locked down, you're not going to do that. But while you're trying to get that level of control, do whatever you have to do. If that means having 57 different envelopes with a couple dollars in each one, and that makes you feel better, that gives you some control, then do it. Don't let Brad or Jonathan say, oh, having cash is a bad idea or it's not secure, right? Like, those are the intellectual arguments that I would give. But intellectual arguments go out the window when you're talking about how do you lock something down psychologically? Because really, for most people, getting on the path to financial independence or just financial solvency
Mm,
is locking this down psychologically, right? And just getting your mind straight over, hey, maybe I haven't known anything about this. Maybe I haven't done it quote unquote right up until now. But I can make these moves to get on the right path. And then once you have everything kind of set, then you could do some advanced stuff, right? Credit card rewards points and all these other things. But until you have it locked down, do whatever you have to do.
agree. And in the meantime, who is anybody to judge? Honestly, I mean, the point is you're taking steps, you're taking actions to improve your life, and that's commendable. Brad, when we started this show with our Friday roundups, one of the ways that we used it was to bring in feedback, which, yes, of course, but even more than that, it was to actually to highlight criticisms. It was recognizing that not only do we not know everything, but sometimes we are either unnecessarily one sided on an argument or, maybe don't catch the nuance. I think that many people can be guilty of that. And I think one of our goals was to, whenever possible, air the other side or a counterpoint to our point. And I think the last couple of weeks we have highlighted the financial services industry and in particular assets under management model, excessive fees, and maybe some incentive disalignment. Basically, financial advisors that are also selling insurance products and as a result are really in a tough spot with making authentically good recommendations because their incentive is to sell insurance because it's a very high commission product. That was the point that was being made in a couple episodes over the last month or so. But I think both of us know and recognize and have said in the past that there are great financial advisors out there. The irritation is how hard it is to find one in a vacuum. And so I wanted to, if we're going to talk about what to watch for in terms of avoiding a financial advisor, I wanted to read this email that was kind of calling us to account about what a good financial advisor, what they would be doing. Because I think it's the other half of the coin. If you're going to go look for an advisor anyways, you should have some sort of, vetting list for what you're hoping they're going to help you with.
Yeah, this sounds great. Let's hear it.
All right. So this is from Cheryl. And Cheryl says, I'm a longtime listener, about a year now, big fan. My daughter is 22 years old and just started her first job and is saving 30% of her salary in hopes of reaching five before the age of 40.
Pretty impressive.
Super impressive. Now, Cheryl says, I am also entering my 20th year being a fee only financial advisor. I work with clients in one of two ways: comprehensive financial planning and investment management, or on a standalone planning basis. Fees for comprehensive planning and investment management start at 1% of assets under management and go lower depending on the size of the portfolio. Standalone plans are quoted on a fixed fee basis depending on the complexity. The client chooses the options that work best for them. Now, in this email, Cheryl mentions an article that was published on our site talking about the cost of fees. And she was basically saying that in this article, we reference how damaging a 2% assets under management model would be. And she was saying it's kind of a straw man. I think you would be hard pressed to find it. I would debate that a little bit, but just for the sake of making the case, if you were paying a 2% assets under management model, the case that the article was making is your portfolio is basically wiped in half over your investing lifetime. So it was basically saying you don't want to do that and giving you something to anchor to.
Yeah, and I think the 2%, I've seen it quoted more as like the 1% or roughly assets under management, and then a 1% mutual fund
Mm,
expense ratio. So most assets under management advisors are not going to just stick you in a standard index fund because they're not really proving that they're adding value. So it's this kind of perverse incentive here. So that's more how I think about it conceptually. But let's just think 2% fee. I think that's what the article was trying to get at. But yeah, if they use 2% as assets under management, that's pretty rare, I'd say.
So she says, I think it would be fine to make the comparison you made, but if you were to do so, use the much more typical fee of 1% in the interest of being totally transparent. And then you should also add that the fee typically declines as the portfolio grows in size. She says, I think it would be near impossible to find someone paying $40,000 a year to have a $2 million portfolio managed. That would actually be interesting. That's a question for our audience. Is that accurate? I mean, is there a situation? I'm sure there's situations where it's worse than that, but maybe this is accurate that a lot of advisors use this blended model where your costs actually go down over time. To your point, though, you wouldn't just look at the assets under management. You'd actually look at the funds that they're putting you in, and you'd be combining the actual assets under management model with the cost of the funds to come up with that number. Now, okay, what I loved about this email from Cheryl is she was actually highlighting the value of what a financial advisor brings. So just a week ago, we were basically saying if you go in saying your goal is financial independence, and the first thing they try to sell you is life insurance, whole life insurance. So life insurance for your whole life, that's a problem. It's a really big red flag of where this is going to go long term.
Yeah, and I certainly still hold to that. I think that is a perfect way to vet someone just originally, right? You walk in, you need some way. It's actually similar to what Paula Pant mentioned about vetting property managers, right? A way to figure that out is to look at their listings. If they're absolute garbage, that's probably not someone who's going to spend the time and care to do a good job for you. So if you're looking for some original way to vet somebody, I think that's a good idea for a property manager. For me, a financial advisor, if the first time you talk to them, they're trying to throw fee laden products, the most fee laden products at you, chances are that's not someone who's going to have your best interest in mind. I don't think there's any question about that. So I certainly hold to that, but I think there's a lot of value in fee only financial planners. And yeah, Cheryl has a list here.
So let's talk about what basically Cheryl says. So if their needs are more complex or they'd like professionals to help them with their personal finances, paying a fee-only planner $10,000 to manage their $1 million portfolio that can be the best money the person ever spent if the planner manages their investments on an ongoing basis. And, all right, so here's the checklist, right? Reminds the person to always save 10 to 15% even when times get rough. Reminds them to always carry disability insurance. Tells them how much to save now to buy their first home in 5 years. Talks them out of taking a larger mortgage than they can afford because the mortgage broker says they qualify. Reminds them not to rely exclusively on employer provided life insurance and instead get their own term life insurance. Reminds them to update all their beneficiary designations when they get married. This is huge. A lot of people have just forgotten to do this, and also do that again when they have kids. Reminds them to get wills, healthcare proxies, power of attorney documents, and to update those documents if their life circumstances change or state laws have changed. Advises them of the impact of marriage on income-based repayment methods of paying off student loans. Counsels them not to buy cryptocurrency just because their brother-in-law did. I was talking family members out of cryptocurrency in December. I remember that as best I could. Yes, that's important. Someone's going to give me flack on crypto. Bring it on. All right. Talks them out of buying that timeshare. Reminds them to increase their umbrella coverage once their teenager starts driving. Reminds them to open a Roth IRA once their teenager starts working. Advises them to open a SEP IRA or solo 401k for their side hustle. Counsels them not to take a loan from their 401k. Reminds at-home parents that too much time spent out of the paid workforce impacts their ability to collect Social Security disability benefits. Suggests they participate in their employer's Roth 401k when they earn too much to contribute to a Roth IRA. Helps you decide how much you can really afford to pay for college for your children. Talks you out of transferring all your assets to an annuity to qualify for financial aid just because the speaker at college night suggested doing so. Yes, this is awesome. I'm going to keep going. I think this is all value added. Suggests you do Roth conversions whenever you are in a low tax bracket. Advises you not to claim Social Security at age 62 just because you can. Advises you to get a prenup if you have substantial wealth or children from a previous marriage. Reviews your tax documents to be sure your tax preparer didn't enter a zero basis for a security because they were missing a tax document. Wow, this is a blueprint here. I apologize for the length of this email, but honestly, there's much more I could have included. I'm sure you get the point. It's true that not everyone needs a personal financial advisor, but it's equally true that some people get value equal to several times any fee they may pay. I agree with Cheryl.
Yep. Here. That's a great list. And yeah, like you said before, we have talked very, very highly of fee only financial planners and financial advisors. I think there's a lot of value. Just the little detail that you might miss, no matter how much you know. We actually had a situation with my parents recently, and they were buying a house. They actually moved down here to Richmond. And because of the timing, the ill timing of selling their house in New York, they actually had an issue with paying to purchase the house here. So they were able to get a piece of information from my Aunt Karen, who has been in the financial services industry for her entire life, that made all the difference in the world. And it's just, even with all the information that I have, it was just one little piece of information that I was totally unaware of. And it made a huge difference for them. I'm not going to go into it because it's very, very niche, but it's just something that I was unaware of. And that one piece of information really dramatically help them. And that's just very, very cool.
I think it's only fair. This is not an endorsement or a vetting. I have not used Cheryl's services personally, but I will include a link to their website for the company she works with in the show notes for the article today if you want to follow up with her. So Cheryl, thank you so much for reaching out to us. This was definitely a value added email. All right, well, let's go ahead and switch gears here. I'm super excited to dive into this past week's episode. Tori Dunlap, her first 100K, everything from childhood entrepreneurship to negotiating your salary to put you in a position to have that 100K saved up by the age of 25. And I want to get your feedback, Brad, but I also want to bring MK into this as well. MK, thanks for joining us today.
Of course, happy to be here.
So I know this is an episode that all of us just absolutely love putting together. And I know you've been in communication with Tori, and I just wanted to kind of get some of your thoughts, just your first general takeaways on this plan that she put together for herself.
I thought that this was an amazing episode. I really wish that this would be required listening for any high school student because what she did when she was younger set her up for success through college, now into her early 20s. So this was an amazing podcast to listen to. She has such a great message. So I was cheering along with the podcast. It was great.
Yeah, I agree completely. And she's talking about negotiating, right? And clearly she was talking about for women, but I mean, personally, I think this is applicable to men as well. I know this is something that I failed miserably on when it came to ultimately my 12-year job that I had after I left the Big 4 accounting firm. And really, that initial lack of negotiating set in motion a significant, probably overall decrease in pay because again, everything starts from that first salary. When you're in big corporate America, everything drives off that first salary. And I know I got questions that I just simply wasn't prepared for, which had to do with things like that I thought were irrelevant, like what were you getting paid previously? I didn't have a good answer to that. I didn't know if you were supposed to answer, honestly. Just something as simple as that. When I was 24 years old, I had no idea what the proper response to that was. And how could they ever check? Do you make it up? Obviously, you don't want to start a situation
Can
where
I
you're
just pick a
lying.
number? I just want to pick a number.
Right? But how is that relevant? But again, that was something that was asked to me. If I was prepared, if I had went through Tori's course, I very strongly suspect I would have had a much higher starting salary, and then every subsequent raise for the 12 years that I was with that company would have been worth more, right? I mean, that is truly compounding. And I think what Tori said is, and I love this quote, negotiation is, quote, pushing back on that, being grateful, of course, but also saying I'm worthy and deserving of more, and not just an arbitrary number out of the air, but here's the data to back it up, right? I mean, how brilliant is that?
hmm
I wonder, it's interesting. Tori was very much, she's speaking to women. That's her platform. She does work with some men, probably a fair number, but she was clearly with this platform, she is speaking to women. Both of us were sitting here thinking, this is the skill that we needed and did not use at any point. I mean, and so we were kind of like, well, can we just be included? Like, I don't know if it really is just a problem that women face in the workforce. Maybe if you have that mentality and you go into it, the interaction is different. I feel like that's something of what Tori was saying, but certainly for me, and this is actually something that I'm still struggling with. Like I think now if I were to go into any job, I would have the confidence to do this. But I'm putting myself in the situation of a new grad with $168,000 of student loan debt, pharmacy schools that are churning out students, and feeling like I'm lucky to have a seat at the table. I go to my professor and I ask him, "Hey, can I negotiate?" Is that, I mean, not my employer, mind you, but like my professor from the school I'm graduating saying, "Is this done?" It was like a communications class, so it felt like a natural thing. And he's like, "No, you can't. No, you can't."
Yeah.
Because they will just go to the next person and the next person. So I think there is some aspect of this that's probably to some varying degree, it's industry specific. But at the same point, I know someone's listening to this that's saying, well, that's a limiting belief. I'm in pharmacy. I graduated the exact same year as you. And I didn't negotiate on my salary. I negotiated on this extra bit. And so I think knowing that having a framework for it and having the skills, even if you're in a tight industry that has lots of turnover, you will be able to get farther ahead than someone that doesn't know the rules is getting. I mean, I think that's the crazy thing. We talk about this in the in the FI space. All of us are playing the game. You don't really get a choice. The question is whether or not you know the rules or not. And the people that don't know the rules just aren't going to be as good, right? You're just flailing around. I think if I had the framework that she talked about, I would have much more confidence. And if not with that first job right out of school, certainly everyone thereafter.
Right. And these rules you're talking about, a lot of it really comes down to very precise language to
Mm.
come to an agreement collaboratively, right? Like I think she talked about her gratitude sandwich, and it was first thank them for the offer, right? And then the meat was the data and your ask. And she said, and I love this, based on the market data to be compensated
Oof,
fairly
that was beautiful.
...
Mhm.
right? And fill it in with whatever, but to be compensated fairly. Who wants to be unfair, right?
I don't want to be
No,
unfair.
not at all. And she said negotiations are collaborations, not conflicts. And you come up with a range, right? And then she talked about the condiments, and I love this was another brilliant one. I want to get to a number we can collaboratively agree on. I want to get to a number, right?
Oh,
Like collaboratively. I mean, who's going to disagree with that? It sounds
these are
wonderful,
such great words.
right? I mean, that is beautiful. I mean, just those 2 lines alone, if you commit those to memory, your negotiation is going to go swimmingly, right? Like, how can you go wrong with those 2? Maybe not in each individual negotiation, right? I mean, of course, we could talk anecdotally, but over the long haul, I mean, those are utterly, utterly brilliant.
MK, I've just talked about my limiting belief, and I'm completely willing to say that that is quite literally. I just said it out loud, but it is a limiting belief that if I had this toolbox, I had these phrases, not these creative ones that I've come up with on the fly, but these scripted words that I literally just need to be able to say with confidence, I would probably have been able to negotiate a better package than I got. I'm like pulling a 180 now, both in that episode, but then again today, watching my mindset shift as I start to see how these words, you can't say no to these words. You just simply can't. If they're underpaying you, they will bring you back in range. If they're paying you fairly, they will move you to the upper end of the range. How nice would it have been to know that I was at the upper end of the range? I am convinced I was not. I was probably middle of the pack, maybe, even on the lower end. So I'm saying that in a pretty tight industry where the range is pretty specific. You come out, you're making a pretty decent bit, but then you just flatline, right? Maybe like cost of living adjustments. But both of you were in industries where it was the wild, wild west. I mean, it really was. You had no idea what anybody else was making. So this whole compensate fairly, mantra, I'm going to use the word mantra here. I'm okay with it. I really, if you were to look at your career and your trajectory, how would that have changed, or how does that compare to your own experience in the workforce, MK?
So I actually did a lot of negotiation in my final 2 companies that I was with. The first company that I was with was very much structured. And I also worked there in 2010 when it was like, okay, well, you want a job or you can take a hike. There's 100 people online. But for the last 2 companies I was with, I negotiated hard, and it was very uncomfortable. So I wish that there had been somebody like Tori, who was she was in college at the time, so she would not have had this thriving industry yet. She had her other businesses, but I wish that I had found her sooner. So I actually practiced negotiating with Jason, my husband. And so he would pretend to be my boss, and he would pretend to be my boss in a good mood, and my boss in a bad mood, and my boss who just had a great budget meeting, and my boss who just had a bad budget meeting. And he would just throw things out at me, and we would just rehearse what I would say to overcome each objection. And we did that when I was with my previous company, when I got the offer for the last company I was with. Each time that I wanted to negotiate a salary or benefit raise on my last company. So we were very good at practicing and rehearsing, and I would say it was very successful. I know that's part of my story, was it was a little hard to leave because I was well compensated, in my opinion. So it was tough to say goodbye, but yeah, this was definitely a great episode because everything she's saying is spot on. Because whether you're male or female and you feel awkward asking for more money, you need to just remember, you know what you're worth. Everybody wants to be fair. Nobody wants to be unfair. And coming at it with those right words and that right terminology, she had the best phrases. I wish I had known them. I could have gotten more.
Yeah, and there were certainly a couple things. She was talking actually about the childhood business she had, but I think it's applicable here. She said, "quote You have to hear no, so you get used to hearing that and keep on moving, right? You inoculate yourself against it. In your case, you had these mock negotiations with your husband, acting as a jerk one time, as a perfectly lovely boss the other. And I think that's important, right? And you could have went a step further and had other people act as your boss, right? But I suspect you went way farther than, well, I know than I ever did, or probably would, frankly, because I would feel awkward. But what a stupid limiting belief, right? So I think what you did was brilliant. And Tori said, you're negotiating for every woman that comes after you when you know your worth. And she also said, once you start advocating for your worth, you will advocate for your worth in every other part of your life. I love that.
Yeah, that was such a great quote. And when you think about it, if you're somebody in the FI community and you're getting a fair compensation at your day job, but you want to do a side hustle to help debt pay off, you're going to charge a fair rate. There's a lot of people in the side hustle and entrepreneurial space who say, I know I should charge more, but I'm afraid to ask. If you're doing that at work in your day job, it makes it easier to do it later. And also other things we've talked about in the FI community, when your company is maybe paying you well, but not treating you well. Compensation's nice, but I know Joel from FI 180 shared that he was told, oh, well, it's mandatory for you to come in on Saturday. And he said, I'm not coming in on Saturday. You're empowered to say, I know what I'm worth and I know what's fair, and what you're asking isn't fair and what you're doing isn't fair. And ultimately, that's where I found myself, where I said, the amount of money you're paying isn't worth everything else I'm having to put up with. And you could 10 times it and it wouldn't be worth it. And it was very empowering to know, being in FI, that all the financials were taken care of because I had negotiated earlier, saved the money, invested it, and able to actually stand up for yourself is very empowering in a world where so many people are bogged down in the stress of their jobs.
I feel like people that have some level of financial stability or on the path to financial independence, going to what you were just talking about, you're doing this for every single person that follows you. People on the path to financial independence do not stay in toxic jobs for very long. They just don't have to. Why would they? Which means you're losing the best performers. You're losing the talent. They're going to good corporate work cultures. There's some amazing employers out there. They're absolutely amazing, and they deserve to have the best talent because they treat their employees right. So in many cases, you can change company culture. If the job needs you more than you need them, that story with Joel is unbelievable. I think there's an article that he wrote about it that we'll have to link up in the show notes. But basically, the employer is they've made commitments that they can't keep. They've overworked their entire team. Team morale is down in the tank. And to try to make up for this, they're just saying, all right, everybody now has to work on the weekends. Everybody has to work on Sunday. I think it's like mandatory OT that you don't get paid for. It was just something absurd. And there was nothing you could do. And they're like, you have to come in on Sunday. And Joel said, well, I'm not coming in on Sunday. I just won't be there. And
he was living the office space life.
Right. It was, yes.
Right.
And the manager, I'm gonna need you to come in on Sunday too. The manager, like, exploded. His head literally exploded. And what happened in that scenario?
Literally exploded?
Okay. Yes. I need to work on my use of that word. I'm going to go ahead and say there was like some steam coming out of the ears though. Upper management found out there's a conflict without resolution, and they got involved, and they realized that this was virtually an abusive situation that was happening, and they changed everything to try to rectify that going forward. I think people say that people don't leave jobs, they leave people. They leave toxic cultures. And when you get to stand, you're not just standing up for yourself. You're standing up for everybody that isn't there. Everybody that's paycheck to paycheck, everybody that desperately needs it and they're afraid to say anything. You actually can. And it was really cool. That's why one of my favorite things to do is highlight these stories of people wielding FU money. Freedom Unlimited families, Freedom Unlimited. They're wielding FU money, and they're doing it to turn or change company culture. It's pretty powerful stuff. And again, it goes to the point that you're getting a lot of the benefits of financial independence long before you reach 25 times your annual expenses. So Brad, I don't know about you, but last night I went into LinkedIn and I updated my LinkedIn profile to published author.
Ooh, sounds intriguing.
Our book, ChooseFI, Your Blueprint to Financial Independence, it launched today, or it launched on October 1st. So by Friday when this is gone, it'll have 4 days. And it got a pretty incredible response on the pre-order side.
It did. It was really exciting to see. My inbox was continually getting new receipts coming in for people saying, I pre-ordered, I want to be part of the live stream. So that was exciting up until just a few hours beforehand. So that was very exciting. And you guys rocked it. You were on every podcast. I was definitely very aggressive in telling you were going to be on all of them. But thankfully, the word got out. And because so many people pre-ordered, a huge thank you to our audience for doing that. What that does is that means the book is very high up on the new releases list and on the hot books to look out for and all those good lists. And that means that people, when they are searching for, I need help with my personal finance, personal money management, and they're putting that into Amazon, our book's going to show up. And then they're going to learn about the FI culture, the FI movement, everything that goes on with it. So, because of what you've done, you are literally helping us spread the fire. The fire is spreading because of what these people who pre ordered did. So, that is a huge thank you. And that is a direct way that you've been able to help more people discover this. So, huge thanks to everybody who pre ordered.
Yeah, and MK, I just want to echo a huge thank you to everybody who pre-ordered. This is really, really incredible. It's wild to be sitting here a foot away from our book. And honestly, Jonathan, I quite literally am a snob with how books look, which is absurd.
He
It's
calls it the Barnes and Nobles test. Tell them about the Barnes and Nobles test, Brad.
is quite literally judging a book by its cover, which is utterly hilarious. But there's just something beautiful about picking up a book and paging through it and just wanting to dive in. And I think this book passes every single one of my admittedly utterly absurd tests, but it's a beautiful book. It's a well-written book. It provides that blueprint. If you're new to FI, this would be a great step-by-step, but also choose your own adventure type reading. I think that's how we set this up. That if you want to look at it as a linear step by step, that's great. If you want to just pick and choose, that's the beauty of FI. There are hundreds of different levers to pull, but you have to take action on some things. I personally don't care what you do. I just care that you do something. You take action to make your life better. So I think this book is a beautiful way to get into it. If you've been a fan of ChooseFI, if you've been following the path to financial independence, this is a great book to buy for somebody else. So a couple things, if you really want to support us, leave a review. After you purchase this, please, please leave a review. There's nothing you can do that would help us more than that. I think joining our book club. I know every single month on Facebook, we have a ChooseFI book of the month. And of course, no surprise, this is going to be an upcoming book. And you can find that if you go to choosefi.com/local and go to the cohort groups. The book club is the very first one that shows up. So definitely join there. And if you want to buy this, we're so used to saying you got to pre-order. No more pre-order. The orders are here, right? That's the cool thing. You can actually buy this book. So go to Barnes and Noble, go to Amazon. You can buy it, get it delivered. But honestly, if you want to get it from your independent bookstore, we are huge supporters of independent bookstores. Go in and ask for the book. And you know what? Take a picture. Nothing would make us happier. How cool would it be, Jonathan?
I would retweet those all day long.
Yeah. You walk into your local bookstore and purchase the ChooseFI book.
I spend very little time on Twitter these days, but I would go on Twitter for that.
Yeah,
I would do it.
Yeah, you and me both. Another one which you got on us about this the other day, but from our local Henrico County Library, we're going to be requesting that this book show up. And for all of you out there, if you don't want to purchase a book, don't. Go to your library and ask for them to buy a copy and have it in circulation. That would be fantastic.
MK, I tagged you on this thread. Someone posted in our Facebook group, but they were saying libraries at their core level, we need to preserve this, if only because this is the last place on earth that exists where you go there and there's no expectation to buy anything. That's pretty fine.
They're truly amazing. And my computer broke last week, and so my husband was like, go to the library and use the computer for the day. I mean, libraries are just an amazing place for your community. You can learn things, you can interact with people, you can be told to be quiet. It's so great. I love it.
Thank you to our community. We honestly, this is I'm almost at a loss for words. I'm never at a loss for words, but I'm so excited.
Never at a loss for
Never
words.
at a loss. It only lasted 2 seconds. But I'm so excited to be able to share this with you and really see your feedback on this. I think one of the cool things about the book group, if you join our book group that Brad just mentioned, is they're going to be going through this chapter by chapter and pulling out, what do you agree with? What do you disagree with? How would you implement this? What does this look like practically for you? I mean, the book group's amazing in that they do this. They don't just do this with our book. It's not like our book is on cycle in this group. It's just they take one book after another, and they break it down to its core bits and then figure out, what is the piece of this that's resonating with you? What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? Like, that's a pretty cool and valuable conversation. And it makes you ingest the information in a way that really sticks. So I want to just echo Brad's feedback that is a worthwhile group to be a part of. So let's switch gears. MK, let's go ahead and bring in the mailbag. What do you got for us today?
Great. Well, we have a lot of really awesome wins to share this week, which is always very positive. So, Cathie posted on Facebook that she booked her first flight for $0 after taking the ChooseFI travel course. So, Cathie wrote, I just booked my first ever trip, flight, hotel, car with points. $0. Such a strange but awesome feeling. Thank you, ChooseFI.
This
So
isn't
she
supposed to work. It's not supposed to work like that. I've been doing travel wrong this entire time.
Well, Cathie definitely got a lot of benefit from our ChooseFI travel course. So if anybody wants to be like Cathie and start booking trips for $0 or thereabouts,
Yeah,
go to
close to $0.
ChooseFI.com/travel.
Yeah, and that is a free email course, so no reason not to sign up. ChooseFI.com/travel. And yeah, I mean, I've traveled all across the world now with rewards points over the last 6 or 7 years. And it really is as easy as it seems, at least in my experience. And if you can build any little bit of flexibility in with your travel, I've taken trips to Europe, I've taken trips to Hawaii, Bermuda, Disney, the San Francisco Bay Area, all over the place. And I mean, I have saved quite literally tens of thousands of dollars on travel. So yeah, ChooseFI.com/travel.
They say travel is the only thing that you spend money on that makes you wealthier. Well, what if you could just not spend money on it and be wealthier? That feels like a nice fit right there. That fits like a glove.
So our next big mailbag piece comes from Jose. Jose wrote in on Facebook to share that they are debt free. So Jose wrote, we are debt free. This month, my wife and I paid the balance on our last outstanding loan. Our first loan was a student loan for $10,000. Our highest debt total was $134,000, including a mortgage, 2 cars, a vacation package, and a 401k loan. 2 years ago, we traded in a used car for a new car, rolled negative equity into the deal, and started regretting it a month later.
You know, what's really crazy about this story, MK, is when Jose is talking about how he found this movement. He says they moved to California 3 years ago while trying to figure out how to deal with the scary housing expenses of Silicon Valley. Him and his family stumbled on Mr. Money Mustache, and he was actually what opened up Jose's eyes to the simple math behind financial independence. So, but he kind of got a little bit intimidated, and he didn't end up taking any action on that math. And so, just kind of, daydreaming about what could be. After listening to his first podcast on Google Music, the mighty algorithm recommended the ChooseFI podcast, and from that, that's what actually allowed them to start taking action on something that was just a daydream before. And so he's now even nudged his naturally frugal wife into a slightly ambitious plan to reach financial independence within 12 years. So what I love about this, though, Brad, is that they go on to actually talk about the actions that they've taken. MK, why don't you tee that up for us?
Yeah, so Jose wrote that since they discovered ChooseFI, they've taken action and tried multiple things. So the principles that they used were as follows. So one was they doubled their household income. Jose writes, my wife started to prepare for interviews 6 months before completing her latest degree. This was on itself like a second job, but paid off greatly. She's been working for world-changing startups the past 18 months, and our savings rate has risen to 65% thanks to her. I simply go with the flow and smile at the corporate minimum salary increases for now. Then they said number 2, they live in the smallest house where they could be happy. It's a 1-bedroom apartment for them. They can clean it quickly, which is great. The landlord takes care of maintenance. They don't have a large mortgage on their names, and they can tap dance to the office every day as there are multiple apartment buildings at walking distance from the office. That was a big one. The third was meal prep. Jose writes, we make 2 large meals every Sunday, 10 portions each. This gives us food for most of the week, but allows us to attend events where food is provided, office weekly lunch with coworkers, and eating out with friends. That's been awesome. As I'm reading these, I'm like remembering all the episodes where we mentioned similar topics. So talking about the income, we talked about with Tori today with negotiating, living close by. We talked about that meal prep.
It works. If you do
I know
it, it just
somebody that,
works.
yeah, Brad and Laura talk about that all the time with their meal prep and their Costco. And then number 4, they said reducing the amount of car miles in their lives. So they're down from 2 cars. So they have 1 car plus public transportation because they walk and bike to work. They live right next to the office. They can walk there every day. He writes, this month we started using our bikes more to visit the library, coffee shops, and parks. I can see how we are starting to get fit enough to ditch the car next year, but they're going to keep their single paid off car for the moment.
I was going to say, man, if you can go no car, That's super impressive. That's next level. Like that's graduate level.
Yeah, yeah. And then, so 5 was keeping track of expenses. They used personal capital to aggregate their credit cards. 6 was geo arbitrage. They moved from California to Texas. So he got a new job. His wife negotiated remote work. On aggregate, they kept most of the same salaries, but they spend less. They pay about 9% less on income taxes, which helps to maximize the 401k. So go Texas. Everything's bigger there, including the benefits, apparently. Um, and number 7 was credit card rewards. So they've decreased their yearly vacation travel home budgets from 4,000 annually to about $600 over the past 2 years. So they literally took everything from every podcast and are
Wow.
applying it, and just it. This is amazing to see everything that they're doing. So big congratulations to Jose and his wife. This is amazing.
Yeah, that is remarkable. That is quite a list of 7 items. And wow, talk about changes. Our highest debt total was $134,000 they had. And now they're on this incredible 12-year path to FI. I
It's
love it.
not going to take them 12
No,
years if they're
not,
moving
not
like
at that
this.
rate. Not at that rate.
That's crazy amazing.
Yeah, huge congrats, Jose.
So we mentioned the ChooseFI book club group, and that's actually one of the cohort groups, but you can find it at choosefi.com/local. And one of the things that we've done is really try to foster community, around this idea of financial independence all around the world, and specifically where you live. And that means practically, while there are hundreds of groups, maybe even more than 300 groups at this point, in every major city, there are new cities popping up all the time. And so, MK, I think we had several new groups that started this week.
We did. We had quite a few groups start this week. So we have Bakersfield, California, Charlottesville, Virginia, Fort Bragg/Fayetteville. We have Nacogdoches or Lufkin, Texas, and Bellingham, Washington domestically. And then the Dominican Republic and Milan, Italy also have local groups. So welcome. And I hope you all are enjoying that.
And I say that to say that I know we have audience, people that have been listening to the show maybe for years in all of these cities that had no idea that a group had formed, And so, first of all, regardless of whether or not you're in any of the ones mentioned just now, go to choosefi.com/local, find a local group in your area and get involved. If it's already tons of activity going on, then go to a meetup, get involved. If there isn't a lot of activity there, if it's quieter, maybe they've been waiting for you, and propose a meetup, get some coffee, find an accountability group, start taking action in your own life. If you heard your area and you're excited about a new group forming, again, get involved. To do that, just go to choosefi.com/local, and it should be very easy to find a local group in your area from there.
Yeah, and what I love about these local groups is every single group is different and they all have their own tone and tenor to them and what type of meetups. I know here locally we've had board game meetups, we've had just getting together at a brewery or at Wegmans even one time, which is kind of cool. But I know the Stanford, California group. So Anna, who's the admin of the Stanford group, after I met her at FinCon, she actually came to a lunch and Laura and I got to meet her. She actually has a cool website called garlicdelight.com that's all about Phi style cooking, which is actually really neat. But she sent me an email talking about the different types of meetups they have. And one that actually really piqued my interest was they have a monthly Q&A. So they solicit questions from the group members and they upvote them and pick, let's say, 8 to 12 questions. And they literally at the meeting, so they don't, one question doesn't monopolize, they have like a 10-minute timer. And at the end of that 10 minutes, they all kind of vote, do we keep talking about this one or do we move on? But they get through the 8 to 12 questions and it's real in-depth knowledge and the entire group helping each other. And I just love that. And I love to see something like that replicated. We always talk about rising tide. So there are many groups out there with these brilliant ideas of what is working for them in their local area. Send us an email, feedback at ChooseFI. If you have some neat way that you're going about your ChooseFI local meetups, send it to us. We'd love to hear it and we'd love to talk about it on the show.
All right. Well, unfortunately, that's going to bring this episode to a close. Now, as you know, we like to finish every Friday roundup by doing a drawing for a copy of a book that we have found useful. And really now going forward, we're doing our book. And parallel to that, we're doing the book of the month from the book club that we just mentioned previously. So those are the two options. To enter the drawing, all you need to do is just go to choosefi.com/iTunes, follow the instructions there, leave us a short written review. and then send us an email to feedback@choosefi.com, letting us know that you left a review and what screen name you left it under. I wanted to say that speaking of reviews and specifically book reviews, we've had so much support from the community and other bloggers in this space already. And I just wanted to give a quick shout out to the Pioneers, Accidental Fire, Stealth Wealth Family, Stop Ironing Shirts, Coach Carson, Budgets Are Sexy, Millennial Revolution, Bigger Pockets Money, Thin Mindset, Retirement Manifesto, What's Up Next podcast. Just really an incredible showing of support from fellow bloggers in our community, just sharing their opinions on the book. And we just appreciate you letting us know about it. And if you're listening to this and want to check out one of those, I'll have a link to those reviews in the show notes for today's episode. Would love it if you clicked on it, or would love it if you went and go read it when you got a chance. Leave them some comments. Let them know what you think. So again, we give away one book for every 5 written reviews that we get, and we announce the winner on the Friday roundup. MK, how many winners do we have today?
So today we have one winner, and that's Taylor. So Taylor left a review saying, "Amazing podcast that changed my life. I found this podcast about 10 months ago after seeing Jonathan in a news segment about travel rewards. I was driving about 3 hours a day for work and was trying to find new podcasts to listen to and figured I would give it a shot. Fast forward to today, and I'm in a much better position than I was when I found it. I quit my job 4 years ago when I was making 6 figures and took a 70% pay cut because I was more interested in spending time with my family than making a lot of money. Even though I was making 6 figures, I had nothing to show for it except a lot of nice things and no student loan debt because I hadn't really saved anything. I was hemorrhaging money and racking up credit card debt to stay afloat because I had bills used to be able to afford when there was a lot more money. After finding this podcast, I became intentional about paying off my debt and formulated a plan. My wife and I just welcomed our first child into the world, and because of the motivation from this podcast to become debt-free, I was able to take 3.5 weeks unpaid leave to bond with her and not worry about how I was going to pay the bills. Thank you, Brad and Jonathan, for playing such an integral part in putting my life on the path to FI."
Wow, that is absolutely incredible. MK, thank you so much for sharing. Well, Brad, the fire is spreading. We'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.